The paintwork is traditionally for modern cars rather weak and poorly resists mechanical stress. Because of this, it quickly becomes chipped and scratched. Of the Opel Corsa D of the first years of production, it is not uncommon for the paintwork to swell and fall off in pieces. During restyling, the manufacturer changed the painting technology and the problem began to occur much less frequently. But the body iron, despite the large number of jokes about the bodies of the Opel brand, turned out to be quite durable and steadfastly resist the onslaught of the red disease. Of course, cars from the big German 3, the body of which is half made of aluminum and plastic, are still far away, but the level of metal processing is much that the pieces of paint chips do not rust for years. Despite the good corrosion protection of the body, there are still a couple of problem areas here. Due to the poor fit of the gaps between the body panels installed too close to each other, after a couple of years of operation, scuffs and corrosion centers appeared at the joints. These include the edge of the hood, tailgate, edges and fenders. We can also note the weak protection of the bottom and closed seams, but at the moment this does not lead to serious consequences for the body. From time to time, you should clean the drains under the windshield, otherwise moisture and dirt will linger in them, which provoke the appearance of rust on seams and moisture ingress into the cabin. Of the problem areas here, one can note the unreliability of the rear door glass heating threads. If they fail, get ready to buy expensive glass. Also, the protective plastic of the front optics turned out to be quite problematic. It quickly gets overridden and becomes cloudy, and the low beam bulbs, they burn out rather quickly. Adaptive AFL headlights can also cause a lot of trouble, which even after a slight contact of the bumper with the curb, as a rule, require the rehabilitation of the fixing elements. After 2-3 years of operation, malfunctions of the reflector and lens drivers appear. Opel Corsa D was equipped with manual transmissions of the F13 Plus and F17 series, the Easytronic Robot and the classic 4-speed automatic AF13. The most reliable from this list turned out to be mechanics and automatic transmissions. As a rule, these boxes do not cause any special problems after 150 to 100,000 kilometers. Of the shortcomings of a mechanical transmission, one can only note the rapid wear of the elements of the gear shift mechanism, backlash appears, which makes it difficult to shift gears. The reverse gear may not turn on. Also, a fairly common problem is the leakage of the working fluid through the oil seals of the drives and the breather of the shift mechanism, so you should not neglect checking the oil level in the gearbox. Clutch with careful operation can last up to 100,000 kilometers. With heavy contamination inside the manual transmission, the wear of the teeth of the differential and the pin of the satellites is significantly accelerated, the destruction of which can result in the gearbox jamming, followed by breaking through the box body. To avoid possible problems, servicemen recommend updating the lubricant in the box every 40–60,000 kilometers. Before buying a used Opel Corsa D, it will not be superfluous to check the performance of the differential. The verification procedure is quite simple. To do this, you need to raise the car on a lift and block one wheel, and spin the second with the help of a motor, after which you need to turn off the car and listen for extraneous sounds from the box. In a similar way, the state of the output shaft bearing is also checked, only without blocking the wheel. The automatic transmission was installed only in a 1.4-liter engine. The box does not cause any problems with proper maintenance. Among other shortcomings of the unit, one can note the rapid contamination of the valve body, the wear of the backs and the forward drum, as well as the weak gland of the gas turbine engine. The gearbox cooling system is also unreliable, which may eventually begin to leak oil at the junctions with the radiator. Solenoids and clutches with careful operation can withstand 200 to 150,000 kilometers. If you operate the car in the sleeper on the floor mode, the gas turbine engine blocking pads will quickly give up. With regular maintenance, the resource of the box will be about 300,000 kilometers. Structurally, the robot is the same mechanism, only with an electro-hydraulic clutch. There are legends about the reliability of a robotic gearbox and not of the best content, and for good reason, since problems with it can begin quite early. The first symptoms of a malfunction of the RCP may appear on a run of 30–50,000 kilometers. The car refuses to start moving after the brake pedal is released, jerks and jolts appear during acceleration and stop. The clutch master cylinder does not function correctly, the gears stop turning on. Most often, the incorrect operation of the transmission is caused by the failure of the actuators or malfunctions in the control unit. The resource of actuators ranges from 50 to 100,000 kilometers, and their replacement will cost about $400–600. Also, the driven disc wears out quite quickly. Because of this, it is recommended to train the robot, adapt to each maintenance. If this is not done, the clutch life is significantly reduced. Other troubles include the unreliability of the selector, controller and gearbox seals, malfunctions of the computer and small resource of brushes in the electric motor, 120–150,000 kilometers go. The secondary shaft also wears out quite quickly, a characteristic hum appears at speed. The disadvantages also include the lack of a system for keeping the car on a rise, so it will not be superfluous to periodically check the operation of the handbrake. You can extend the life of the robotic gearbox by reducing the interval between service intervals to 20–25,000 kilometers. The line of power units Opel Corsa D consists of 3- and 4-cylinder engines, gasoline atmospheric 1.0 60 horsepower, 1.2 80 horsepower, and 1.4 90 horsepower. Turbocharged 1.4 120 horsepower, 1.6 150 and 192 horsepower, diesel CDDI 1.3 75 and 95 horsepower, and 1.7 120 horsepower. Until 2010, all engines met Euro 4 standards, after Euro 5. Metal chain works in the time and drive of all units. In a liter engine, its average resource is 100–150,000 kilometers, in the rest about 200,000. On press-style cars, the chain may be asked to be replaced after 50,000 kilometers. The motors do not cause any serious problems, since by the time this generation of the car appeared, the manufacturer had managed to eliminate the main weaknesses inherent in previous generations. For trouble-free operation of the unit every 40–45,000 kilometers, it is necessary to replace the spark plugs and clean the throttle. The resource of engine with proper maintenance will be about 250–350,000 kilometers. Among the shortcomings, one can note the insufficient power of 3-cylinder unit Z10XEP and A10XEP installed after restyling. They are too weak for a car weighing 1.3 tons, so it is stupid to extend good dynamics from them. Common ailments include leaking crankshaft oil seals, gaskets, and an oil pressure sensor. Also, the flow meter thermostat seals cannot be called reliable, and the thermostat itself quickly becomes unusable. The ignition module can also be attributed to the problem. The fact that one module is installed on all ignition coils, and in the event of a gap in one of the cylinders, there is a high probability of its failure. With the advent of severe frosts, the starter may stop working, the lubricant in the retractor freezes. In order to restore the performance of the part, you need to place the car in a warm garage. For 1.4 motors, if there is increased noise of the motor, in addition to the chain, it is worth checking the twin port, since very often the problem lies precisely in it. In addition to the standard ways to eliminate the disease, repair, replacement, you can fix the dampers in the open position and turn off the system, but after that you will need to reconfigure the computer to work without twin port. Over time, the notorious EGR valve may also remind of itself, since in addition to an expensive replacement, there are alternative ways to solve the problem: repair, installing a plug. Symptoms: speed flaws, dynamics worsen, stalls at idle. Turbocharged 1.6 engines, thanks to the high power density per liter of displacement, make this small machine a real lighter. When choosing a car with such an engine in the secondary market, you need to understand that such cars are not bought for measured driver around the city and are operated quite harshly, so professional diagnostics of the unit will not be superfluous. As for the weaknesses of the motor, then, like most Opel engines, oil leaks from under the valve cover are a common ailment. Also, from the little things, one can note the presence of shuffling sounds coming from the phase shifters, injectors, and the air conditioning compressor. This trouble is a feature of the motor and in most cases does not need to be eliminated. But the presence of detonations and oil consumption is a sure sign about the approaching capital of the engine. The pistons are falling apart. It is worth noting that when operating a car in the sleeper on the floor mode, a unit overhaul may be required on a run of 100–150,000 kilometers. Diesel engines Opel Corsa D. Engines running on heavy fuel do not cause any particular problems. Among the shortcomings, capricious fuel equipment can be noted, which, when using low-quality fuel, by 100,000 km may not be in the best condition. The high-pressure fuel pump and nozzles fail. There is also a high probability of early failure of the EGR valve. It becomes clogged with salt and begins to wedge. Frequent short trips contribute to the rapid falling of the diesel particulate filter, DPF. The turbocharger, with proper operation, will last 150–100,000 kilometers. It is worth noting that the replacement of the turbine is not a cheap pleasure, about 950 euros. Other troubles include weak crankshaft seals, pan and cylinder head gasket, and a generator. Otherwise, diesel engines are reliable, and the 1.7-liter 8-valves Isuzu engine is one of the most reliable among diesel engines. In front of the Opel Corsa D, an independent McPherson-Strauss suspension with anti-roll bar is used and the beam in the rear. Chassis is not the strongest side of the car and starts to bother with all sorts of breakdowns early enough. Most often, like most modern cars, you have to change the stabilizer struts and bushings. On average, they are enough for 15–30,000 kilometers. Shock absorbers, thrust bearings, tie rod and tips are often rented out on a run of 60–80,000 kilometers. Wheel bearings are also not famous for their long life, especially if the car has 16-inch wheels. Another typical problem is the rapid wear of the springs, sagging. Ball bearings with careful operation nurse up to 120,000 kilometers. The silent blocks of the front levers can pleasant with a range of 120–150,000 kilometers, but the rubber bands of the rear beam rarely live up to 100,000 kilometers. The problematic point of the rear suspension is the shock absorber boot. Over time it flies off the seat and rattles when driving on rough roads. The weak points of the Opel Corsa D include the power steering rack. Most often, malfunctions in the rack are caused by severe wear of the plastic bushings, knocking, damage to the anthers and electronics failures, wiring damage, malfunctions of the steering wheel position sensors, ABS, BCM unit and amplifier control unit. Incorrect operation of the ECU is accompanied by jerks when turning the steering wheel at small angles. It is worth noting that in the event of a generator failure, the electric amplifier will not work correctly and will regularly generate errors. The main problem of the brake system is the tendency of its elements to corrosion. Rust appears most quickly on the fingers of the calipers. Also, due to deep corrosion of the brake mechanism, parking brake pads can pop out of the guides. In addition to a pleasant design, the interior of the Opel Corsa D has sufficiently wear-resistant materials, so that even in a car with decent mileage, the interior does not look pretty shabby. Of the shortcomings, one can only note the harsh plastic, which eventually begins to emit extraneous sounds, knocks, squeaks, etc., and rather poor sound insulation. Closer to 100,000 km, the leather steering wheel braid begins to climb. On the same run, under the overall drivers, passengers, the front seats may begin to sag. Quite often, Opel owners blame the presence of squeaks while lowering or raising the front side windows. The disease is eliminated by applying a silicone grease to the window mechanism. On some instances, seals on the doors began to fall off over time. Often there are complaints about the unreliability of the seat belt buckle. Electrics. As for the reliability of the electrical equipment of the Opel Corsa D, there are a couple of significant comments. Frankly, the weak point in electronics is the air conditioning system. Most often, owners are faced with a motor failure. The first symptoms, noisy operation, appear quite early, after 50,000 kilometers, and by 100,000 kilometers on most copies it needs to be replaced. Also, the cause of incorrect operation of the ventilation system is a malfunction of the gear motors and the control unit. Often, incorrect operation of the air conditioner is caused by freon leaks through weak seals, which weakly give up due to the strong vibration load of the unit. Quite often, the clutch of the compressor itself fails. It is also worth highlighting the rather weak security of the air conditioner, which is why there is a high probability of stone falling into it while driving. There are also complaints about the reliability of the front and rear wiper motors, seat heating elements. Relatively often voltage regulators become unusable, and although the solution to the problem does not require significant costs, it is highly likely that it will lead to failure of other vehicles' systems, in particular to the failure of the BCM. Over time, on pre-styled versions, the display of the onboard computer may become moping, it gradually loses pixels. To restore the display you will need to solder the cable. If this does not help, you will have to change the computer unit assembly. After 5–7 years of operation, the backlight bulbs for the interior equipment controls begin to go out. It is not always possible to fix the problem by replacing the light bulb diode, since some elements are not collapsible. Opel Corsa D has all the qualities of a successful compact car: practicality, efficiency and reliability. In addition, this model has a decent level of safety. Despite the above shortcomings, this car is practically in no way inferior to its competitors, and in some aspects even surpasses them. Today, Opel Corsa D is quite common on our roads, which indicates a high interest in this model, its availability and reliability. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.